The sirens outside wailed as the ambulance pulled up to the hospital entrance, its lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Inside, Emily clutched her belly, sweat lining her forehead as another contraction rippled through her body. Her face was pale but determined, holding on through the pain with every ounce of strength she had. "You're doing great, honey," the paramedic said gently, as nurses rushed forward with a wheelchair. Mark, her husband, trailed behind. But something about him was off. His phone buzzed in his hand, and instead of giving Emily his full attention, he glanced down at the screen, typing quickly and biting his lip. Emily reached out to him, needing reassurance, but he barely made eye contact. I just need to handle something at work," he muttered, voice low, trying to mask his discomfort. "It's urgent. I'll be right back." She looked at him, eyes wide with disbelief as the hospital doors opened and she was wheeled inside. Mark didn't follow. Instead, he turned and walked toward the parking lot, already typing furiously on his phone. Across town, in a luxury hotel room, someone else was waiting for him. Her name was Zoe, and she had no idea what was happening at that very moment, no idea that Emily, the woman whose husband she was sharing a bed with, was about to give birth. As Emily was taken into the delivery room, tears in her eyes and no husband by her side, the screen fades to black and a voiceover cuts in. While one woman brought life into the world, another exposed a betrayal that would destroy everything. The truth was only a selfie away. The story was about to explode, not in whispers or private accusations, but in front of thousands. On Instagram, Emily and Mark had the kind of love story that made others envious. They met during their sophomore year at university, Emily, a passionate literature major with dreams of becoming a published author, and Mark, a charismatic business student with sharp ambition and a contagious laugh. Their connection was immediate, electric even, and within months, they were inseparable. They studied together late into the night, took spontaneous road trips on weekends, and built dreams about a future filled with love, success, and eventually, a family. Their wedding, just a year after graduation, was a small yet elegant affair held in the garden of Emily's childhood home. Everything from the handwritten vows to the shared glances across the aisle made it seem like they were made for each other. To everyone who knew them, they were the golden couple, the embodiment of what real love looked like. After marriage, Emily made a choice many found surprising. Though she had landed a job at a respected publishing house, she stepped away from her rising career to help Mark build his startup. He had launched a digital marketing company and insisted he could do it on his own, but Emily believed in his vision. She believed in him. So, she took on the administrative load, managed client communication, and handled the finances in the early days. Mark often praised her as the backbone of the business, publicly crediting her at networking events and in interviews. Privately, he'd kiss her forehead and say, "We're going to make it because of you." When they decided to start a family, Emily approached motherhood with the same devotion. She read books, joined prenatal yoga classes, and transformed their spare room into a cozy nursery. Mark, at first, seemed equally excited. He came to the doctor's appointments, placed his hand on her belly at night, and joked about baby names. But as her due date got closer, something shifted. Mark became distant, buried in his laptop during dinner, stepping out often to take calls that seemed to last longer than necessary. His late nights at the office, once occasional, became routine. Emily, who once found comfort in his focus, now began to feel invisible. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just nervous about fatherhood or overwhelmed with the mounting business pressure. But in quiet moments, while folding baby clothes alone or watching the clock tick past midnight, doubt began to creep in. Her friends noticed too. "He seems distracted," one of them mentioned gently over coffee, but Emily had brushed it off. After all, Mark loved her. They had built everything together. And yet, a silent ache settled in her chest. Something was off. But she never could have imagined just how far it had gone, or how heartbreakingly public the truth would become. Zoe was the kind of woman who made heads turn wherever she went. At just 25 years old, she had built a name for herself as a rising fitness influencer, with a growing social media following and a perfectly curated online presence. Her Instagram was filled with workout videos, smoothie bowls, and mirror selfies taken in high-end gyms and luxury apartments. She posted motivational captions about self-love, discipline, and hustle, messages that resonated with thousands of followers who admired her dedication and sculpted body. But behind the filters and hashtags was a woman who had learned how to use attention to her advantage. She knew the power of her image, and more importantly, she knew how to get what she wanted. When she met Mark, it wasn't at a party or through mutual friends. It was at the gym, an upscale boutique gym that catered to professionals and influencers alike. Mark had been struggling through a set of deadlifts when Zoe walked in wearing coordinated activewear and wireless headphones. She caught his eye immediately, and he made sure she noticed. Their first conversation was about protein shakes. Their second was about marketing. Zoe was looking for someone to help her grow her brand, and Mark, always the charmer, offered his services. At first, it was just business. Mark helped her plan a few ad campaigns and connected her with some PR firms. But the flirtation was obvious from the start. Zoe laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. Mark complimented her a little too often. And soon, business meetings turned into long dinners, and long dinners turned into hotel rooms. Zoe didn't ask too many questions about his home life, and Mark didn't volunteer any answers. He wore his wedding ring less often, claiming it got in the way during workouts. He never mentioned Emily, not even once, and Zoe never asked. In her mind, Mark was charming, successful, and available, and that was all that mattered. Their affair wasn't exactly subtle, even if it was technically hidden. They were spotted together by gym staff, seen entering elevators together at odd hours, and occasionally tagged in background shots of other people's Instagram stories. Zoe, in particular, had a habit of posting without thinking. A close-up of wine glasses clinking at a rooftop bar. A boomerang of her blowing a kiss into the camera while a man's hand rested on her waist. She never mentioned Mark's name or showed his face directly, but the clues were there for anyone looking closely. Mark should have been more careful. He was a married man with a baby on the way, living a life built on loyalty and trust. But the thrill of sneaking around, the rush of being wanted, seemed to cloud his judgment. He was reckless, and Zoe, blinded by the attention and gifts, never questioned the consequences. Neither of them realized that one day, the very app that brought them together, Instagram, would be the thing that tore everything apart. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Emily felt the first sharp wave of pain ripple through her abdomen. At first, she thought it was just a Braxton Hicks contraction, false labor, nothing serious. But when the second wave hit harder and closer together, her instincts told her something was different. She was only 38 weeks along, and although the nursery was ready, and the hospital bag had been packed for weeks, she hadn't expected the baby to come just yet. She called out for Mark, her voice strained, and he rushed in from the other room, phone still in hand, brows furrowed, not with concern, but with confusion. "Now?" he asked, as if it were an inconvenience, as if the baby had interrupted something important. Emily nodded, gripping the back of the couch as another contraction took hold. Mark sighed and looked at his phone screen, thumb hovering over an unsent message. He tucked it into his pocket, forcing a smile. "Okay, let's go," he said, grabbing the car keys. The ride to the hospital was filled with tension, not from Emily's pain, though it was growing with every passing minute, but from the silence between them. Mark kept checking the time, glancing down at his phone whenever they stopped at a red light. Emily, though in pain, noticed it all. She wanted to believe he was just nervous. She wanted to think he was overwhelmed by the gravity of becoming a father. But something in his energy felt wrong, detached. When they arrived at the hospital, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair, and Emily, clutching her belly, was rolled through the sliding doors. Mark walked alongside them for a moment, then paused. "I'm just going to grab a coffee real quick," he said casually, backing away. "Be right back." Emily, through gritted teeth, looked up at him. "Now?" she asked, incredulous, barely able to focus through the pain. He gave her a tight nod, then turned and walked off without waiting for a reply. But he didn't head toward the hospital cafe. Instead, once out of sight, Mark pulled out his phone and typed quickly. "I'm on my way," he texted Zoe. She replied almost instantly, "Room's ready." Without a second thought, he got into his car and drove in the opposite direction of the hospital, his wife now inside in active labor. Mark's heart pounded, not with guilt or fear, but with adrenaline. He told himself he had time. He convinced himself Emily would be fine for a couple of hours, that he'd make it back before the baby arrived. He justified his absence by calling it just one more time. In his mind, the affair hadn't yet cost him anything. What he didn't know was that the clock had already started ticking, and the price for his betrayal would soon be more public and more devastating than he could have ever imagined. The lobby of the luxury hotel was sleek and modern, all marble floors and gold accents, humming softly with the quiet professionalism of staff trained to never ask questions. Mark walked through the revolving doors with a forced casualness, pulling his cap lower over his face even though no one knew him here. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't look at it. Not yet. Zoe was already waiting for him in the lounge near the elevators, her long legs crossed, sipping a matcha latte she'd ordered purely for aesthetics. She looked radiant, fully done up with makeup that made her eyes pop, and wearing a tight black dress that left little to the imagination. "Took you long enough," she said with a teasing grin as she stood up and kissed his cheek. Mark gave a half-smile, checking over his shoulder before ushering her toward the elevator. The receptionist barely looked up as he handed over his ID and got the keycard for their suite. Room 1807, penthouse level, with a view of the city lights and just enough space to pretend this was a real escape. Once inside the room, Zoe kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the plush king-size bed, laughing as she opened her front-facing camera. "This place is gorgeous," she said, already angling her phone for the perfect shot. "Gotta show my followers what they're missing." Mark was barely listening. He walked over to the minibar, pulled out a tiny bottle of scotch, and downed it in one swallow. His phone buzzed again, "Emily." He didn't even glance at the screen this time. Instead, he turned it over and switched it to silent mode, the screen going dark. Somewhere, just a few miles away, his wife was in a hospital bed, in the throes of labor, breathing through pain and asking for him. But here, in this hotel suite, Mark told himself he deserved a moment of escape. Just a few hours. No one would know. Zoe posed by the window, snapping selfies with the sparkling skyline in the background. She wasn't just tagging vague captions anymore. She typed out the name of the hotel, added a location tag, and used hashtags like #DateNight, #Spoiled, and #MysteryMan. In one boomerang, she clinked 2 glasses of wine together, hers and Mark's, though his face was cropped just out of view. Still, his watch was visible, the one Emily had given him on their anniversary. Another story showed Zoe blowing a kiss at the camera, a shadowy male figure lying in bed behind her, barely noticeable unless you paused the video. But that's all it would take. One pause. One friend scrolling through Instagram at the right time. One person connecting the dots. Mark walked out of the bathroom, towel in hand, running it through his hair. Zoe looked up from her phone. "Wanna be in one with me?" she asked playfully, holding up her phone. He chuckled and shook his head. "Let's keep it low-key," he said. But the damage was already done. Zoe had posted everything. Within minutes, her stories were being viewed by thousands, including mutual acquaintances who happened to follow both her and Emily. The notifications were starting to trickle in. Comments, DMs, screenshots. And soon, whispers would begin. Questions. Suspicions. The kind of digital breadcrumb trail that couldn't be erased, not even if he tried. But Mark didn't know that yet. He lay back against the pillows, eyes closed, pretending that this was normal. That nothing was falling apart. That the woman he had vowed to love and protect wasn't giving birth alone. Emily's breaths came in sharp, uneven bursts as she gripped the hospital bed rails, each contraction tightening her entire body like a vice. The sterile white walls of the delivery room felt cold and unwelcoming, and despite the bright overhead lights, a heavy shadow seemed to settle over her spirit. The pain was relentless, and the absence of Mark, her husband, the man she thought would be by her side, was a weight she could hardly bear. Every time she reached out for him, hoping for a comforting hand or a reassuring glance, there was only empty space. Nurses bustled in and out, offering gentle words and adjusting monitors, but none could replace the warmth of her partner. Between contractions, Emily's voice trembled as she asked repeatedly, "Where is he? Why isn't he here?" The nursing staff exchanged concerned looks. They tried calling Mark several times, using the number he had provided as emergency contact, but every attempt went unanswered. One nurse whispered softly, "He's not picking up," while another checked his last known location on the hospital's system and confirmed he hadn't been around since Emily was admitted. The room felt increasingly isolating as the clock ticked forward, each minute stretching like an eternity. Emily's face was pale, her eyes glassy with tears she fought hard not to shed. The pain was real, but the emotional ache of abandonment was crushing. She had expected to welcome their child surrounded by love and support, not loneliness and silence. Just when the silence threatened to overwhelm her, the door creaked open and a familiar figure appeared, Linda, Emily's mother. Relief flooded Emily's eyes as she saw her mom's calm, reassuring face. Linda wasted no time. She took Emily's trembling hand in hers and settled into the chair beside the bed, speaking in soothing tones. "I'm here now, sweetheart. You're not alone." Her presence was like a bomb, grounding Emily through the long hours ahead. Linda coached her through breathing exercises, whispered words of encouragement, and rubbed her back gently, reminding her she was strong, she was brave, and soon, she would hold her baby in her arms. The bond between mother and daughter was raw and powerful in that moment, a stark contrast to the absence of the father who had chosen to abandon them. As the labor progressed, Emily's cries became more desperate, yet her spirit remained unbroken. Nurses came and went, adjusting monitors, prepping for delivery, and offering intermittent reassurances that the baby was doing well. Linda stayed close, her hand never leaving Emily's. Together, they faced the exhausting, painful hours, one contraction at a time. Outside the room, hospital staff whispered about the missing husband, the growing tension palpable. Some staff quietly expressed sympathy, others judgment. But for Emily, those walls became her sanctuary, not because of their sterility, but because of the fierce love that held her up when everything else felt like it was falling apart. In those long, grueling hours, Emily learned the true meaning of strength. She faced the hardest moment of her life not with the man she married, but with the unwavering support of her mother and her own unyielding courage. Alone in that hospital room, with pain crashing over her like relentless waves, Emily clung to hope, the hope that this betrayal would not define her, and that her baby would come into the world surrounded by love, no matter what. Zoe's fingers danced across her phone screen as she curated the perfect Instagram story to share with her thousands of followers. The sleek hotel room behind her sparkled in the soft ambient light, the city skyline casting a breathtaking backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. With a mischievous smile, she snapped a selfie, her eyes sparkling with excitement and a hint of pride. "My king spoils me kiss mark #date night," she captioned the photo, tagging the hotel's location and adding a string of popular hashtags that would guarantee maximum exposure. She posted it immediately, oblivious to the storm she was about to unleash. The likes and comments began to pour in within seconds, fire emojis, heart eyes, and envious remarks flooded her notifications, fueling her sense of validation. Emboldened by the response, Zoe posted a short video clip next, capturing herself spinning playfully in front of the full-length mirror. The camera caught more than just her radiant smile. For a split second, Mark's reflection appeared behind her, leaning casually against the doorframe, his face half hidden in shadows but unmistakably his. To Zoe, it was just a cool shot, an unintentional cameo in her glamorous night. But for anyone paying attention, it was a glaring sign, a breadcrumb revealing more than she intended. The story lingered on screens and was quickly shared among followers and mutual friends alike, setting off a ripple effect. One of those mutual friends was Rachel, a close college buddy of Emily's who still kept tabs on her life through social media. Rachel's heart skipped a beat when she stumbled upon Zoe's post. The hashtags, the location, the unmistakable reflection, it all hit her like a punch to the gut. She knew Emily was in labor at the hospital, and here was Mark, captured in a hotel room with another woman. The betrayal was raw and undeniable. Without hesitation, Rachel took screenshots of the stories and sent them directly to Emily's phone, her message simple but urgent: "You need to see this." Emily's hands trembled as she unlocked her phone, the hospital room suddenly feeling even colder. As she scrolled through the images, the pain of labor was momentarily eclipsed by a sharper, deeper sting, the sting of betrayal broadcast for the world to see. The sterile hospital walls echoed with the silent question hanging in the air: how could he? The nurses noticed the sudden change in her demeanor but didn't press, sensing a private heartbreak unfolding. Meanwhile, the Instagram story continued to circulate, reaching more and more people who recognized the scandal behind the glamorous facade. Comments started popping up on Zoe's post, some praising her beauty, others hinting at the scandal with cryptic emojis and whispers of drama. Followers debated quietly in direct messages, the story spreading like wildfire. The seeds of a public scandal had been sown, all from a few casual selfies meant to show off a night of indulgence. As Emily lay there, grappling with the painful knowledge of what was happening behind the scenes, the digital world buzzed with activity. Mark's hidden life was no longer a secret, it was out in the open, exposed by the very woman who had once vowed to keep it hidden. And as the notifications piled up, so did the weight of what this meant, not just for Emily and Mark's marriage, but for the fragile new life about to enter the world. Linda's hands shook slightly as she scrolled through the screenshots on her phone, her eyes fixed on the images of Zoe's Instagram stories. The laughter, the wine glasses, the location tag of the luxury hotel, it all painted a picture far from the reality unfolding in the hospital just miles away. She knew Emily was in the most vulnerable, painful moment of her life, bringing their child into the world, and yet here was the man she trusted most, caught in a web of betrayal so public it could not be ignored. With a heavy heart, Linda stepped out of Emily's room and approached one of the nurses nearby, a kind woman named Sarah who had been caring for Emily since her arrival. "Sarah, I need you to see this," Linda said quietly, showing her the phone. Sarah's eyes scanned the images, her face tightening as the gravity of the situation settled in. The nurse glanced around, lowering her voice. "This is serious," she said softly. "It's not just the absence, it's this, him celebrating while she's in labor. That's unacceptable." Word began to spread among the hospital staff, discreet but unavoidable. Some whispered in hushed tones about Mark's apparent neglect, others expressed sympathy for Emily, whose pain was no longer just physical but emotional and public. The sterile hospital corridors seemed to hum with a different energy now, one charged with disbelief and quiet outrage. Linda returned to Emily's side, phone tucked safely away, her expression composed but her mind racing. She looked down at her daughter, who was pale but still fighting through the contractions, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the hospital walls. For a moment, Linda hesitated, battling the instinct to protect her child from more pain and the urgent need for truth. Telling Emily now could shatter her focus, making an already brutal experience even harder to endure. Yet withholding the truth felt like complicity in the betrayal. In that silent moment, Linda made her choice. She would wait, hold the secret close until Emily was strong enough to face it. For now, her priority was to be the steady presence her daughter desperately needed. As nurses continued to monitor Emily's vital signs and offer comfort, Linda silently vowed to be the shield between her daughter and the cruel realities of a husband's betrayal. It was a painful, lonely decision, but one made out of love. The truth would come soon enough, when the time was right. Until then, Linda's quiet strength would hold Emily together. After hours of relentless contractions and unimaginable pain, Emily finally felt the first precious moments of relief as her baby girl was born. The delivery room filled with soft cries, and the nurse placed the tiny, fragile bundle in Emily's arms. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the delicate features of her daughter for the very first time. "Grace," the nurse whispered gently, announcing the name Emily had carefully chosen weeks ago. The sound of her baby's cries was a balm to her soul, a sign of new life and hope amid the turmoil. For a brief moment, nothing else mattered except the soft rise and fall of Grace's chest against her mother's. But amid this miracle, a heavy emptiness lingered. Mark was nowhere to be found. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft coos of the newborn and Emily's shallow breaths as she held her daughter close. Between moments of exhaustion and joy, Emily's eyes searched the door, her voice breaking as she asked repeatedly, "Where is he? Where's Mark?" Nurses exchanged uneasy glances but offered little reassurance. His phone remained silent, unanswered calls stacking up in the waiting room and beyond. The absence of the father cast a long shadow over what should have been a moment of pure happiness. Emily's heart ached not just from the labor, but from the realization that the man she trusted had chosen to be absent at the most critical time. Still, she held Grace tightly, determined that this baby would know love, even if it wasn't from the man who had promised it. The journey ahead was uncertain, but in her daughter's tiny fingers wrapped around hers, Emily found a new kind of strength, one born from pain but fueled by hope. Hours after Emily had given birth, the hospital corridors were quieter, bathed in the soft glow of evening lights filtering through tall windows. Mark finally appeared, walking in with an air of forced calm, his tie loosened and a vague tiredness painted across his face. He carried a small bouquet of wilting flowers, clearly plucked in a hurry, and wore an expression rehearsed for sympathy. "Sorry, Emily," he murmured as he entered the room, voice low but strained. "Work ran late. I had meetings that couldn't be postponed." He smiled weakly, hoping the tired excuse would cover the guilt that gnawed at him inside. Emily, holding baby Grace close, looked up at him with a mix of relief and confusion. "You were gone, the whole time," she whispered, her voice fragile but edged with hurt. Before she could say more, the door opened again and Linda stepped in, her posture stiff, eyes flashing with quiet fury. She didn't waste words. "Mark, we need to talk," Linda said firmly, her tone leaving no room for denial. She pulled out her phone and showed him the screenshots, Zoe's Instagram selfies, the tagged hotel, the playful captions, and most damning of all, his own reflection in the background. Mark's confident facade faltered immediately. His eyes widened, heart pounding as he took in the evidence, each image a nail in the coffin of his excuses. "That's not what it looks like," he stammered, voice cracking. "It was just," he paused, struggling to find a lie that could hold. "We were just meeting to discuss business." "I wasn't." "I didn't," but the words fell flat, swallowed by the weight of truth. What he didn't realize was that Emily had been standing just outside the room, her ears catching every word, every shaky denial. The pain and betrayal cut deeper than any contraction had. She felt her world unraveling in that very moment, her husband's carefully constructed lies laid bare, his absence from her labor no longer explainable or forgivable. Tears welled up in her eyes, but her voice was steady when she finally spoke. "Don't lie to me, Mark. I saw everything." Her words hung heavy in the air, a sentence that marked the end of trust and the beginning of a painful new reality. Linda moved closer to Emily, offering silent support, while Mark's expression shifted from desperation to defeat. The staff outside the room had begun to notice the confrontation, whispers spreading like wildfire through the hospital halls. Mark, once proud and composed, now stood exposed, his betrayal no longer a secret but a public spectacle. The flowers in his hands seemed suddenly meaningless, wilted symbols of a love that had withered away long before this night. As Emily clutched baby Grace to her chest, she made a silent vow, this was not the end of her story. Mark's return was too late, his excuses too hollow, and the damage too profound. But she would rise from this heartbreak, stronger, wiser, and ready to protect the new life she had brought into the world, no matter what. Emily's breath hitched as the weight of Mark's betrayal crashed down on her all at once. Tears streamed freely, spilling over the exhaustion etched deep into her face. For a moment, she simply broke, her body shaking, shoulders trembling with the kind of heartbreak that felt like it might shatter her completely. The room seemed to close in around her, the pain of labor now mingled with an unbearable sense of loss. The man she had trusted, the man who had promised to stand by her side through every moment, had abandoned her when she needed him most, and not only that, had flaunted his betrayal for the world to see. It was more than she could bear. But then, as the tears slowed, something shifted inside Emily. The raw sorrow gave way to a cold, simmering fury, quiet but fierce. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, her gaze sharpening as she looked directly at Mark. There was no longer room for excuses or lies. "I don't want you here," she said quietly but firmly. "Leave. Now." The words echoed with a finality that stunned even Mark. This wasn't just anger, it was the beginning of her reclaiming control over a life that had been fractured by his choices. Mark's face paled, his eyes searching hers, suddenly realizing that the damage was irreparable. He opened his mouth to plead, to explain, but no words came that could mend the broken trust. He had taken for granted not only Emily's love but also her strength, and now he faced the crushing weight of what he had destroyed. The flowers in his hands seemed absurdly out of place, tokens of a love that had already died. Slowly, he gathered himself and turned away, the hallway swallowing his retreat as Emily watched, heart heavy but resolute. Left alone with baby Grace and the quiet hum of hospital machines, Emily felt numb wash over her, a protective shield against the storm of emotions raging inside. The pain of betrayal was fierce, but beneath it was a growing fire of determination. She would heal. She would fight. For her daughter, for herself. And most of all, she would never allow anyone to diminish her worth again. Almost overnight, Zoe's Instagram post exploded across social media platforms, spreading far beyond her initial circle of followers. What started as a few curious likes quickly ballooned into thousands of shares, comments, and reposts. Screenshots of her selfies, especially the one showing Mark's reflection, flooded Twitter threads, gossip forums, and even local news outlets. The story of a husband cheating while his wife was in labor became a headline that caught the attention of many, especially those who knew Emily and Mark personally. Friends of Emily expressed shock and heartbreak in comments and private messages, rallying around her with support and outrage. "How could he, and she deserves so much better," were common refrains that echoed across timelines. Even Mark's colleagues and business associates took notice. His carefully cultivated professional image began to crumble as whispers of the scandal reached his workplace. Clients started questioning his reliability and ethics, wondering if the personal betrayal reflected deeper cracks in his character and business dealings. Some contracts were put on hold, while competitors seized the opportunity to highlight Mark's apparent lack of integrity. Industry insiders debated quietly about the impact this personal scandal might have on his company's future. What was once a promising startup now faced uncertainty and skepticism. For Mark, the fallout was swift and brutal. The scandal wasn't just a private matter anymore, it was public, viral, and unforgiving. His social media accounts flooded with negative comments and messages, and his attempts to post vague apologies only fueled the fire. Meanwhile, Emily's name became synonymous with resilience and strength, as many rallied behind her story of betrayal and survival. The digital world had turned into a battlefield where reputations were destroyed and rebuilt, and Mark's empire was beginning to crumble under the weight of his own choices. 3 months had passed since that painful night in the hospital, and Emily was beginning to rebuild her life, piece by piece, day by day. The fresh wounds of betrayal had started to heal, replaced by a growing sense of strength and purpose. Holding baby Grace in her arms, she realized that her story, painful as it was, could become a beacon for others facing similar struggles. Inspired by the support she had received from friends and strangers alike, Emily decided to channel her energy into something positive. She started a parenting blog, pouring her heart into every post. From sharing candid moments of sleepless nights and diaper changes to offering advice on balancing single motherhood and self-care, her words resonated deeply. Her honesty and vulnerability struck a chord, drawing in a community of women who had been through heartbreak, loss, and new beginnings. Comments and messages flooded in from mothers who found comfort in Emily's journey. Many shared their own stories, creating a supportive network where empathy and encouragement flourished. "You're not alone," one reader wrote. "Thank you for reminding me to be strong." Another shared, "Your courage gives me hope." Emily responded to as many as she could, building genuine connections that transcended the screen. The blog quickly grew beyond a personal outlet. It became a movement, a virtual village of resilience and empowerment. Through the highs and lows, Emily found not just validation but friendship, solidarity, and a renewed sense of identity. Most importantly, Emily embraced her role as a single mother with pride. She no longer saw her family's fractured past as a weakness but as the foundation of her strength. She celebrated every milestone with grace, first smiles, first steps, and savored the quiet moments of joy they shared. Friends noticed the glow about her, the confidence in her walk, the light in her eyes. Emily had transformed heartbreak into empowerment, learning to stand tall on her own. She was proof that even in the darkest times, new life and new hope could flourish. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Emily and Grace would face it together, unbreakable and unstoppable. Mark sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, fingers trembling as he drafted a public apology on his phone. The glow of the screen illuminated his tired face as he struggled to find the right words that could somehow undo the damage, mend the broken trust, and salvage his reputation. After several drafts, he settled on a message that was brief but meant to sound sincere. I deeply regret my actions and the pain I caused my family. I am committed to making things right and learning from my mistakes. With a hesitant tap, he posted it on all his social media accounts, hoping the public would accept his remorse. What happened next was far from what Mark expected. Comments poured in instantly, but instead of sympathy, they were filled with scorn, ridicule, and harsh judgment. People called him names, mocked his excuses, and reminded him of the betrayal he had so publicly exposed. Too little, too late, one user wrote. Another commented, actions speak louder than words, and you've already spoken volumes. The hashtag Mark the Cheater trended briefly, turning his apology into a viral moment of public shaming. Mark's attempts to respond only fueled the fire, with every comment met by new waves of criticism. Meanwhile, Zoe vanished from the online world. Her accounts were suddenly deactivated or deleted, leaving her followers puzzled and the scandal with one less visible player. It was as if she had disappeared, avoiding the fallout that Mark could no longer escape. In the midst of the chaos, Emily shared a quiet, powerful message of her own. She posted a soft, glowing photo of herself holding baby Grace, both of them smiling gently at the camera. The caption read simply, "We needed no one else." The post was met with overwhelming love and support, likes, heartfelt comments, and messages of encouragement from the community she had built. While Mark's world crumbled, Emily's radiance shone brighter than ever, a testament to resilience, healing, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. A woman in labor is experiencing one of the most vulnerable and profound moments of her life. It is a time when she deserves unwavering loyalty, presence, and support, not betrayal, deception, or abandonment. This story reminds us that trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, and once broken, it can leave wounds that run far deeper than the physical pain of childbirth. Betrayal cuts through the very core of love, shattering the bonds built over years of shared dreams and sacrifices. But beyond the heartbreak lies a powerful truth: self-worth is not defined by others' actions but by how we rise after being hurt. Emily's journey shows us that resilience is born from the hardest moments. When faced with pain and betrayal, she chose not to be defeated. Instead, she found strength in herself and in the love for her child. Her story is a beacon for anyone who has been let down by those they trusted most. It teaches us that while others may falter, we can hold on to our dignity and rebuild stronger than before. No one deserves to be abandoned when they need support the most, especially not during life's most challenging trials. This is a call to action, a call to recognize and honor the sacrifices and strength of women everywhere. Loyalty and respect should never be optional. If you believe in standing up for what's right and uplifting those who have been wronged, let your voice be heard. Comment strong below if you believe every woman deserves better than lies and betrayal. Together, we can create a world where loyalty is celebrated and self-worth is never compromised. Remember, strength isn't just surviving, it's thriving despite the odds. And every woman going through her own battles deserves to know she is not alone. Let this story inspire you to stand with the resilient, to champion truth, and to honor the unbreakable spirit within us all.